Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast for the final time in Season 6 of our show. I'm your host, Lyndon Willoughby. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Willoughby. We've been driven inside tonight. We finally got the cold weather that we had been waiting for so long, but on this particular day, it came with a bunch of nasty-ass rain. So
yeah, it was pretty gross. So I will say this is the second intro we're recording today because we had a catastrophic Zencaster failure a little bit into our first intro, and you had a great line that I want to reuse here. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a podcast co-hosted by a couple of snarky assholes, joined by another couple of snarky assholes this time around.
And I forget the context. I really do. But you're right. Yeah, Zencaster totally bit the big one there for a second. It's like, you know, the little graph of the proton torpedo going down the reactor shaft in the center of the Death Star, and then it hits the middle, and it's like yeah, it's like that.
That's great.
Yeah. And then it all blew up. But we're back again, just much like the Death Star. You couldn't keep us down. Hopefully we don't also need a Star Killer base. And,
oh, God.
And with that, I've taken this analogy absolutely as far as it will go, which means it's time for me to do something useful on this podcast and introduce the second half of the hosting staff tonight. That means that I have the pleasure once again of introducing on the pod the dynamic duo, the brothers at one of our sister shows, guys, that we love talking to at any given opportunity, and that would be, of course,
the
Hyrule Podcasters. We need to stack the. We need to go listen to like if we're getting better at that or not. You know?
Yeah, I wonder. I'm curious if we're getting any better. I feel like we're getting better.
It feels good every time.
I feel like we're getting better. It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Mm-hmm. What up, boys?
Hey, good to see you guys.
Ben and Pat. It's been too long. I know the original plan was to bring you guys onto the show at some point during our stretch of episodes covering the Adventure of Link, and best laid plans couldn't make it happen. Somebody had some nuptials that they had to go do. So
not bad. It was great, man.
That's why I was spared. I didn't realize why we didn't make it onto this season. But thanks for getting married for more than one reason.
Didn't have to replay Adventure of Link to get on the podcast this time.
I have enough trauma from playing that game on the Hyrule Podcasters that, I'm all right taking the bench for your season. But I'm glad to be here today, and I promise I won't just be a curmudgeon about the game. I have some good things to say about it, I promise.
Well, before we get into that, I feel like we do need to back up for 1 second and offer a heartfelt congratulations to Ben. Seriously. Air horns! Yay! Yeah, we're thrilled for you. Hoping that everything went super well and that your day was free of stress or catastrophe.
Absolutely. It was a wonderfully executed project that ended successful, so we're very happy with it.
Boom. We love to hear it.
You got the married, and that is the important part.
The married.
I'm sorry, he says it was what did he say? It was a well-executed project
that ended successfully.
I feel like
I am very happy that things went well for you. Were you able to partake in a honeymoon, or are you doing that whole thing where you just sit on it for a while and come back to it later?
No, we left 3 days later for Puerto Rico, and we stayed at a bed and breakfast. It was a vegetarian bed and breakfast about a block from the beach, and we just relaxed every single day for 5 days. It was wonderful. It was perfect.
It's awesome. Are you vegan?
Jenny is 100% vegan. I am I'm a vegetarian all the way, but I eat vegan regularly.
Okay.
just
Fair
by virtue of like taking meals together with your partner, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a vegetarian, and then I met Jen. So then I have just kind of gone that way.
And when he's in Ohio, he gets all the pizza and all the dairy products. And
Lots of cheese in Ohio.
Yeah,
Lots of
fair
there
enough.
is a lot of
Ohio.
cheese in Ohio in general. And so he takes advantage of that. You know, it's good to eat foods that you grew up with. It makes you feel happy. And since Ben runs a lot, he can eat a lot, and I'll just watch him eat like a whole pizza. It's pretty incredible.
Dang,
Anyway.
that is pretty incredible.
I mean,
It's pretty incredible.
as an eater of like a lot of cheese, I love that for you. And like I'm very happy for you. So
Thank you.
nice. Well, anyway, yeah. So like I said, definitely didn't manage to circle up in one of our main episodes about Adventure of Link, but I don't know if y'all have been keeping up with the pod at all, really, since we talked last. But basically, this crazy thing happened where this game, this crazy 10-hour maximum game, if that, right, somehow consumed our entire lives for 6 weeks, and like we were unable to record an episode talking about it that clocked in at anything less than 2.5 hours. That was the shortest one that we had.
Two
listened-
hours.
You know, I
we
listened
had one
to
that was 2 hours.
I listened to all y'all's episodes, and every week I was just like, "Is it going to be 2 hours? Is it going to be 2 hours? Oh, it's 2 hours again! All right." Like,
Yeah, it was impressive. I didn't listen to every episode, but I peek in, and I was like, they're really going in. I mean, you gave it what it deserves. The way that you guys analyze games, this has a lot to think about. It's not like a crappy game that doesn't have a lot going on. It's a crappy game that has so much going on.
You're getting ahead of one of our main questions right here off the bat. Way to get that out of the way. No, I mean, I totally agree. Like it was something about this game just defied being able to discuss in any kind of like meaningful way in like a short form episode. And so, yeah, they just became like these megaton gargantuan conversations. And yeah, I Matt and I both had a lot of fun with that being the case, but definitely am excited to be able to talk to y'all about it now, because I know that this is a game that y'all have played in the not too distant past. And also this one kind of like, I know that for y'all, Zelda 1 is a big part of your history with Zelda, like y'all definitely kind of jumped on in very close to the beginning in the 8-bit days. And so this game, kind of would have been in there and a part of that whole era as well. And so I've been very curious to kind of know what y'all's history is with Adventure of Link. So why don't we go ahead and start there? What is y'all's history with Adventure of Link?
Ben, you wanna take this one, or do you want me to color it with my disdain?
Yeah. I'll jump in and kind of be the cheerleader, be the Joshua for this week. I will say I don't recall exactly when we would have played this when I was younger, but all I know is that and by we I mean my mom and I for sure played almost every single game that was in that kind of action RPG type structure. I know you all had quite the discussion with Max about, is this an RPG? Is it not an RPG? And we can like set that aside because, the game is almost 40 years old and we have new societal structures that dictate and cultural structures that dictate what an RPG is. Mm-hmm. But it was an action RPG like that. Like at the time, that's what it was. And
sure.
So, I mean, we played Star Tropics, we played The Adventure of Link, we played the Final Fantasies, we played the Ultimas. So we cycled through all of those type of games with, big overworlds, no overworlds, just dungeons. It was just something that was just so kind of a part of it. That I know that when my mom and my Aunt Becky originally got the game, they were like, what is this? This is not what they were expecting at all. But considering that they had already bought it and they definitely didn't have a lot of money at that time in their lives, they weren't not going to play it. And so they, frustratedly moved their way through it. And so that's kind of my, piecing together stories that I have been told and assumptions that I am making. And then I had most recently played it. I played it on a ROM probably in college is the first time I really remember kind of circling back around to it before this most recent iteration where we obviously played through it for the podcast.
A couple times because we kind of messed up and we haven't told everybody. No, we'll wait to tell everybody what happened there.
All right.
I don't think this is the moment, but
no, that sounds good because we definitely once we get housekeeping out of the way and everything, I want to come back into it with y'all's podcast and where this kind of fit into that, your conclusions and whatnot. But anyway, keep going.
So Ben was the RPG player when we were kids. I was a platformer, and I continued to grow my platforming skills, Mega Man's, my jams, and so I picked this game up when it showed up on the Wii U. And I played it a bit, and I probably put like 2-3 hours in, and I just couldn't stop dying in just simple hand-to-hand combat. And so I had to put the game down, and I was like saving state every time that I approached an enemy with legs and arms. You know what I mean? And I got to say, as I know that you guys found out or knew from the jump, the rewind feature on Switch just makes this game so much more playable. And I bet that I would have played more of it if I would have been able to rewind on the Wii U. But regardless, we ended up playing it on our podcast. And that's the first time I actually played through it.
On the Switch, right? Not on the Wii U?
We played through it on an emulator on the podcast. Okay. We did not play it on the Switch. We did not have rewinds. We did not... We had some fun. It was a fun time.
So hold on, you didn't have rewind. Did you have save states at least?
Yeah, but we weren't really using them very much. Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in the beginning we kind of didn't use save states liberally because we still kind of beholden to these old rules of purist nonsense. Even though we say we're not purists at the beginning of the podcast, we're like, oh, don't save the state.
Yeah. So what we would do is we would use a save state if it made sense in terms of just kind of, we didn't want to have to replay a whole chunk of something. So like we might save state at the beginning of like a palace. And then if we died in the palace, instead of having to start back at the North Palace and walk all the way back, we could just load that up simply just from like we're trying to create content and you just kind of got like, I don't want to waste the 3 minutes to walk all the way back. Yeah. But a lot of times if it made sense that we died and then went back to North Palace and had to walk all the way back, we would do that in the show and just like talk through it because we're like, oh, that's like part of it. And so it just depended on what made sense in terms of, putting out like a piece of media that made sense that also wasn't just like us just wasting time at some point. Mm-hmm. And I'd say kind of closer to the end of the game, we started taking a bit more snapshots. But the idea was like, if dying is supposed to be a punishment, it has a particular repercussion like in the game. And so we would always make sure that repercussion like got applied. So if we had to backtrack to have, 0 XP or something like that, we'd make sure we were always doing that.
Yikes. Wow. Y'all. I mean, yep. I say emphatically, yikes.
You should have seen the look of horror Lyndon and I gave each other when you said you didn't use rewind or save states. We're like, what?
I mean, y'all played a natural Zelda 2 right there.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we really did. And I got to say, by the end of it, we were pretty good.
We were very good. We were very good at this game.
Yeah, Iron Knuckles weren't the threat that they were. We understood, we knew how to time the respawns. Like we were real good there at the end. It was it was tough. It was also all we had going. It was pre-vax quarantine and it was our second season, or it was the second half of our first season, and we put a lot of time into it. Ben especially was just, his hand-to-hand combat skills in the game were incredible.
Yep.
Well, that, I mean, honestly, that sounds like a fascinating tale. I can't wait to get more into it. Let's go ahead and call this first little chunk the teaser for the remainder of the episode. If you want to hang around, then this is what you're going to get more of. Before we get into that, let's get our housekeeping out of the way real fast so that we can just let this conversation spin out in whichever way it's going to do.
As it often spins into unpredictable directions.
Spins, man.
Much like my car into a concrete barrier sometimes.
I cut that out of the podcast. Yeah, I cut that out of the episode that Max was on. Matt wrecked his car a few weeks ago, and
no!
But you're okay, right?
I am fine. Yes,
Okay,
it was.
good.
I hydroplaned, and by the grace of God, I am not dead. But yes,
Amazing.
I am okay.
yeah. So you derailed. So you made this like serious and a big deal, but I was about to segue. Like we were talking about spinning, and I was about to break out into the you spin me right round, baby, and it was going to take me into housekeeping.
Oh, that would have been better. Let's just do that.
Well, no, I can't do it.
No,
now.
we got to rewind. We got to
dude.
That's what editing's for. That's what editing's
You
for.
spin me right round, baby, right round.
round like a record,
Baby, right round. There we go.
Okay, now we did
We
it.
recovered.
Congratulations.
I'll take it. That was a gift that I didn't know that I needed. I don't feel like I deserved that, but you know what? It happened, and I think we're all better for it. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda. One little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and so much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get on our Patreon is that we read their names every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Kelso, Chris, Tiffany the Star, Daxel, Patrice, Stephanie, Darknuck, Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Allie, Lennon, Kolku, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Keep It Going, Dante, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Tyler, Ben, Daniel, Nick D_TV, Christian, Jonathan, Hyrule Interviews, aka Maximum Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals, and we could not make this podcast without them. Thank you so much for your generous support. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the remainder of the episode. As we mentioned at the top, this is not a regular episode. This is a bonus episode. The Sacred Realms Rundown will be returning again next week with our first installment of the Wind Waker. But for now, we're going to tie up our thoughts, both ours and Hyrule Podcasters, about Zelda 2 and 8-bit Zelda games in general. So I'm going to kick it back over to Ben and Pat. I'm assuming that you played this game second, right? Because your whole thing was that you were going in chronological release order.
Yep, you got that right.
That is correct. Yep.
Cool. So I want to circle back to the way that you were kind of playing this game, because I can't conceive of this experience without save states and without a lot of the safety nets that playing on the Switch kind of afforded us. And like to Matt and I, that even didn't feel like too much respite at times, right? We were talking to Max when he was on about the emulated version that he played, and a few of the extra, ease of use sort of things he granted himself in that version. Yeah, exactly. So it's really difficult for me to imagine having a good time, with playing the game in that way, and especially knowing that your whole format relies on you kind of like, it's not like you play it and then you come back in a few days and talk about it. Y'all's whole thing is that you're talking about it while you're playing it, and that is what your content is made up of. So I mean, what kind of podcast did you get out of this whole experience?
Well, I haven't gone back and listened, but it was Ben did most of the playing because genuinely because we just couldn't figure out a way for it to pass the save state back and forth super easily. And
I had a much older computer at the time, and so his ability to run certain programs was pretty handicapped, and so we had to be really careful about how we managed the actual like ROM and emulator and the save states and all those kind of things.
And so not only did I only get to play when we played in person, which means Ben took on a huge amount of the burden, but again, it was pre-vax quarantine. So when we did play the game together, it was like outside in the winter or like in a garage. Like in
Ohio.
Yeah. Or like it was like the amount of problem solving that went into this second half of this first season of the Hyrule Podcasters kept my mind occupied enough during that time of COVID that I came out of it a sane person. It's like the challenges of the adventure of Link were good for me at the time because I didn't have a lot going on other than what the heck is going on the earth, you know? And I'll always have a place in my heart for this game just because it provided me a distraction from life at the time.
So you also split your first season up between the first two games the same way that we did.
Yeah. So I had looked around and what I was trying to, so I got the idea for the podcast from listening to this one called No One Can Know About This, which they do the exact same thing we do, except for Final Fantasy. And so I had kind of messaged them a little bit because I, had this idea about doing it for Zelda and was interested in it. And so got some good feedback from them on just structure. And I was concerned that the first game, was going to be too short to establish a podcast based on it. And so, because everything that I got told is you really want like 10 episodes, was always the goal. Like get 10 episodes out. That is a solid foundation of a podcast that even if you have to take a break, that's a really good number to be at. It's a really high percentage, but it's like 80 or 85% of podcasts that are started don't reach episode 10. And so I really wanted a structure that was going to like force us to get past 10. And I just knew that the original Legend of Zelda, no matter how slowly you play it, or you'd have to do some pretty crazy things and to really spool it out if you wanted to get more than 10 episodes. And so then it just made a lot of sense to play 1 and 2 back to back since, they came out within a year of each other in Japan. They were both of the NES. And I thought it made a nice, like really tight season to kind of keep people engaged.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I want to circle back to something you said real quick, which was your observation that or your statistic that 85% of podcasts don't make it. Past what'd you say? Past 10 episodes?
It's something like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So both of us being on shows that have well exceeded that mark, I feel like we should give each other a round of applause real quick.
Let's do it. Come on.
Yay! There you go.
Go us.
So much in not quitting. You haven't failed your podcast until you stop making it. And even then, maybe you didn't fail. A lot of my musician friends, oh no, I failed. My career sucks. But you're still putting out music. Nobody does that. Like few people make it past that mark. So we can celebrate that. And much like podcasts, this game probably only gets like 3% played by most people. So even if you're making it only halfway through, or if you're using rewinds or save states the whole time, if you play, I'll give you 3 hours of this game, you have succeeded at the adventure of Link, I think.
Yeah, and I think, absolutely.
And I think, Pat, that's a really good reflection from yours. So, I've watched my brother for, he's 36. So let's be generous and say you started your musical career at 15. I've watched him for 20 years create music and be passionate and just love what he is doing and just pour his heart and soul into it and have a family that has supported him, have partners that have supported him and friends and colleagues and all those kind of things. And just realizing like it takes so much work to ever get anywhere. And, what we really got to the point of is like, our goal was to have fun with each other doing it, and we are still doing that. But just to know, like, for me personally, just to know that, like, I create something that will essentially live in perpetuity, that people could find 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, and that it is something that I put a lot of myself into and put out there. That's something that makes it really easy to be like, oh yeah, like we're going to suffer through the, Link's adventure, if that's what it takes, because like it was a really good thing to do. And it was a challenge creatively, for both of us.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun too.
To that point, though, like, talking about, getting people in the door and establishing a foundation and kind of building a show off of these two early games, did you have a concern on your end of things that even though chronologically it makes sense to start with these games, and especially with the specific nostalgia that you have for them, like that's like a good energy to bring into a discussion, right? And so I definitely see the value in that. But were you worried that these two games were maybe not the ones that would capture people the same way as like Ocarina of Time might?
Definitely. We've talked about this a lot before we started the podcast. It was the probably biggest question that we had on how we were going to do this. Are we going to play this first game first? And, I feel like our pros and cons lists were pretty even between this and other Zelda games. And the fact of the matter is we were doing this to have fun, and we wanted to start from the beginning. And also, it's just a really good organizational tool. I mean, you'll see in our later seasons that we decided to play Ocarina before Link's Awakening, much to my dismay, because Ben
either one of those would have worked. Actually, yeah.
I feel bad because Chagrin Falls and Chagrin Valley is a nice place in Northeast Ohio. Anyway, so Ben made the decision to play Ocarina before Link's Awakening so we could play it with the rest of the world when it came out on Switch. And it didn't do a whole lot for us in the long run, but it was fun. Like those first few episodes, we got a lot of people that were diving into the game again. But I think that that test right there proved in the long run that we made the right decision from the jump. Am I getting this right, Ben? Are you remembering this similarly?
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things that I knew about just going into podcasting is that, it takes such a long time to build an audience. Like if you're starting like how our two podcasts have, where I think, Lyndon, you might have a bit of an influence coming out of like the designer creative space, but very minimal. I mean, you seem to have known a few people, but like that was it. Like, and that's not an audience. That's just like knowing a few people. Yeah. And so like we're all starting from essentially scratch, where we don't know anybody and we don't have an audience. Right. And doing that for a podcast is one of the hardest things that you can do, is to start like from scratch. And so I knew that, our first 2-3 years of doing this, our growth, like I had pretty good ideas of like what our growth would be. And we're at that level that I had expected us to be at, where, we have like a solid base, like in probably the low hundreds of people that are listening. And that's kind of it. And to move into that next like niche, that next like magnitude level where you're at like, like the like 5,000-6,000 takes an entirely different style of podcast, or it just takes a lot more time. And so my feeling is like, oh, well, if we get to year 3, and that, which is what I think both of our seasons are coming up on, is like 3 years of doing this, or our third year of doing this, and we're running smack dab into Breath of the Wild 2. Like that's the moment to be like established as a podcast, and to say like, hey, like we have all this great content that you can listen to, for us on the Hyrule Podcasters, audio only Let's Plays and the enjoyment of that. On the Sacred Realms, you're able to, dive in and explore these games. But then we're all just going to have, I really feel like this like awakening of all of these people wanting to come back and explore the series as we get closer and closer, than as we actually get into playing Tears/Tears, of the Kingdom.
Would you
Tears Tears?
Would you say that it's a Link's Awakening?
Hey. And maybe they'll see this new game and then use their Switch to link them to the past to play these old games.
Whoa. Hey. It just keeps going. It just keeps going.
And so, yeah, so I mean, those are all the, and I mean, this is one of the reasons I've, really enjoyed being on the podcast, on each other's podcast quite a few times, is it also feels like you all are thinking about this in like, I don't think we're out here trying to make like a ton of money doing this, but we are interested in the business and creative merging that happens in a product like this, which might come a lot, from, having a brother, on my side who, did music for so long, and then Lyndon on your side, and all the artwork that you're doing in that like creative business space is a really interesting place to play around in and to be a part of.
I think that we made some questionable decisions, like starting with the first game ever that's 1 million years old, and people that listen to podcasts aren't really in the demographic of the people that played that game necessarily. But in the same way, they made a lot of creative decisions for this game, The Adventure of Link, that didn't pan out in some ways and did pan out in other ways. You have to take risks in a creative space in order to succeed in the long run. And you have to be able to look ahead,
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because this season has actually been the season where we've had the highest growth in our own podcast. We went from about, absolutely, by far.
Yep.
We were averaging about 500 downloads a week, and we shot up to, we're averaging 1,000 downloads a week.
Ooh,
plus
congrats.
500. Plus like 500-ish on the YouTube from Zelda Universe.
Sick.
So like it like
pop is legit.
It's wild that we started getting such traction with this particular season. It like blew us both away when we started seeing that number just going up and up and up. And
people are hate listening.
Dude, I know, right? They're like, I just want to listen to somebody shit on all these games. Oh my God. And I'm just like, look, man, you're going to get some of that. There's no doubt.
Absolutely.
But I think it's just so interesting that this sphere, the Zelda community in general, has such diehard devotion for the series that they're willing to listen to 2 hours worth of podcast about what is probably the least liked or one of the least liked games in the whole series. Like it's wild. I love it. And like Linda and I have talked so much about Zelda. There's not a bad Zelda game. And I think we came away from this season still agreeing with that. And as much as there's not a bad as much as there's not a bad Zelda game, I also think that Zelda has one of the best communities out there. It is just unilaterally supportive, non-toxic. I mean, our own Discord community has really grown into a really awesome place. And that's fantastic. Just a microcosm of the larger Zelda like community. And it's so awesome to just be a part of that now.
And the last thing I'll say about this before I kind of move us on to talking more specifically about Zelda 2 is that I have found that to be the case with my artwork as well, is that the Zelda community I have routinely gotten so much support from the Zelda community anytime I come up with something Zelda related. They just go crazy for it, and it's great because I never get tired of making it. So Zelda definitely, I think by many metrics, many people I think would call the Legend of Zelda series probably, I certainly think it's the greatest series in the history of gaming, and I think most people would admit that it's certainly in the conversation. It's
definitely in the. Facts. I think most people could probably put it in that like top 3, top 5 for an overall series for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and I think you can see the proof of that in in many metrics and in many ways. But definitely the passion of its fan base and the size of its passionate fan base is one of those as well. And so
for sure.
Yeah. And we've all been beneficiaries of that, I know.
If I can sneak one thing in, if you ever do a reprint of your purple Majora's Mask one, can you just let me know?
Hey,
just let me know. I don't know if you ever do it again, but if you do it again, let me know.
I probably won't, but I have one I can send to you.
What?
Hey, look at that. How about that?
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
We'll take this offline. Take it offline.
Sounds good.
Do you want it signed? Because we do that for very special people.
Ooh, absolutely.
I'll sign that. Yeah, hell yeah. Okay, so anyway. Okay, I love that. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Incredible.
These are the things that make me feel good. So let's take it back to Zelda 2 for a minute. And so Matt actually kind of teed me up for the first main thing that I really want to get into here, which is the premise on which we founded the show is that we don't believe a bad Nintendo made and published Zelda game exists.
And we can extend that to Capcom too.
Capcom was the developer, not the publisher of the...
well, you said Nintendo made, so
well, okay,
Nintendo published.
You're right. Yeah, okay. Just for clarity, there's no world where I was not including the Oracle games and Minish Cap in that.
Oh, got it. Okay,
in that umbrella.
Those are Capcom games.
Yes.
Yeah, they were. Anywho, so the premise was that no bad Nintendo officially sanctioned Zelda game exists. And at the end of this season, once the dust had settled and we kind of really had time to sit with our thoughts, we found that we still agreed with that premise. We do not think that Zelda 2 broke our main rule. And so I would like to ask you guys, do you feel like Zelda 2 is a bad game or a bad Zelda game?
I know that Ben doesn't think it's a bad game at all. He thinks that it's better than other Zelda games. Sorry to speak for you, brother, but my answer is just a little more complicated. I definitely think that it's the worst Zelda game by far that I've played. Now, I haven't played a couple of them, but I've played a bit of all of the Zelda games. I think that, it's got a good story. It's got cool music. It was innovative. So much of the, there's so much good that came out of it that I'll agree with, who was it, Max, that said it's the Steamboat Willie of Zelda games, where you look back at it and you're like, obvious flaws. And even at the time, like my brother said, our mom was like, screw this. This is not a Zelda game. And that's super frustrating. But I mean, really, now that I've spent some time away from it, I think that the only huge complaint, sure, it's obnoxious that the game looks and plays a lot differently than the first game, but that there was no precedent. There was just one game. Who knew if every sequel was going to be different? The big thing is just the fighting mechanics suck. And does that make a whole game bad because it's hard to stab enemies in the face? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's tough because, I think from what we know about the game, they were really trying to create a game that put combat and sword mechanics at the front. And so if you're finding yourself frustrated by those very mechanics that they were trying to bring to the front after the first game, which really didn't have a lot of, it wasn't based around, sword combat for the most part. I think that would make it very hard to defend it as a very good game. And I think that is like the exact point where I come in and I'm like, yes, like I found, my ability to master the complexity of combat in Link's Adventure. Once you mastered it, it was like, oh yes, like the game felt entirely different. I really felt like it reminded me, and I know people hate when people do this, but it just reminded me so much of playing Dark Souls.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you guys play those kind of games? I'm not really sure.
Not really. I have dabbled a little bit in Dark Souls, not a lot. I find the punishment for the sake of punishment mechanic to not be my favorite thing in the world.
Okay. So there's sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that I also have not played I have not played any of the Souls games. However, I do actually kind of skew a little bit more towards that kind of difficulty challenge sort of game, I think, than Matt really does. And that set me up for, I think, a little bit more of a pleasant experience with this game than Matt really had. Like, I mean, some of my favorite games that have released in the last few years have been indies like Hyper Light Drifter and Celeste, and granted, Celeste is a platformer, but like they're both games that have like just a hyperactive difficulty curve, really.
So. No, I'm sorry. I just want to clarify something on mine. But if you want to let you,
no, you're good, Matt.
Yeah.
Good.
So I want to clarify that. Like, I don't dislike hard games. I like hard games. I play every game that I have ever owned. I have played at one point or another on the hardest difficulty. I've even tried my best to beat Halo 2 on Legendary. Did not succeed, but I tried. My problem with And this is less a problem with Souls. I approached Dark Souls specifically at a time in my life where I was just like I didn't have the mental capacity for it. I was a pre-med student doing 18 hours of school every week or every semester, and also trying to work a job. So like I just didn't have time for it. So
sure.
yeah, I approached the Souls games at kind of a bad time, so that kind of put me off to them. But like when it comes to hard games, I like hard games. I like hard games that challenge you, reward you for overcoming that challenge, and like they punish you for not overcoming it, but not to an extent that it just turns you off. And we actually had a pretty good discussion about this on our Discord today, which was like Metroid Dread is actually a very hard game combat wise, and is kind of a good analog, a modern day analog to Adventure of Link. But I think where Metroid Dread succeeds that Adventure of Link fails is it is so much more rewarding to get good at combat in the game. You get to the point where you get the perfect parries down, or you get the dodge down, or you understand the mechanics and maneuvering of a certain boss to the point that you can then dodge their attacks more effectively. And you get that stun lock on the boss and initiated damage phase. And like at some point it does come down to modern day gaming is just way better at giving you that dopamine rush with those glowy circles and the flashy mechanics. And like that is definitely an aspect of it. But if it intrinsically makes you feel more rewarded for being good at something, you can't say that it's not effective. And that's kind of where I land with it is Adventure of Link, while I did get noticeably better at the combat, and it was one of the things I was definitely most proud of as the game went on, was I got better at the combat. It never felt as rewarding to me as beating that level on Legendary in Halo 3, or beating that boss in Metroid Dread, or beating that really hard encounter on Mass Effect and Insanity. Like finally beat those 4 banshees in the one room with the same time the brute was chasing me down, and like I leveled myself up enough to do it. Or in Witcher 3 when I'm on Death March difficulty and I finally beat that griffin. Like all of those things have a much more visceral feeling of reward than I ever got out of Adventure of Link.
Well, and I know that's one of the things, having listened to you, over the years, that I know that it seems like you seem to also have a difficulty connecting with the older, like just the oldness of some of the games, and kind of the visuals that you're presented with really make it difficult for you to kind of get into that story in a way that you would want to be and kind of feel as connected as well, which I think also creates a barrier, right? The game puts up lots of barriers, and any one of those is enough to knock like most people off. And I think that causes that level of friction, can be frustrating and difficult. And I think the way that I actually wanted to go with kind of the Dark Souls reference isn't about like the game's hard, because I mean, I don't know, every game can kind of be hard, but it was more like I remember I watched this really great video from this creator called the Game Maker's Toolkit, and he talked about, and this is after I had bounced off Dark Souls quite a few times, and I watched that video, and he talks about like how dying is used as a structural mechanic in the game to teach you about the game. And I took that exact same idea and put it on top of my Legend of Zelda or Adventure of Link playthrough this last time we were going through it, and just realizing like, oh, right, like the reason that they have the live counter is such like a deliberate choice, because they could kick you back to North Palace like every time you die, right? But there was a reason they're like, oh no, because dying is part of this. There are random traps in floors that you're just going to fall down. There are bridges that collapse. You have no idea they're going to collapse. There's pee bags that look like you can grab that you really can't. And like they knew that, and they're like, okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to get to this point. You are probably going to die. And instead of having it be like a full reset of the game, right, and we're going to send you, back to the starting area, instead we have this life mechanic. So that way it actually gives you multiple attempts to push through and progress and get to a point where you can be more comfortable. And so I really found myself kind of, really thinking through the life system and how that was constructed in a way that was going to allow us to learn the game at a pace that made sense. And I really saw it as a way to show us like, hey, we're not kicking you back every time. We actually are giving that space to explore and to potentially die, and to not be concerned that you're going to die, because you are, and we're giving you lives to help balance that out.
And that makes a lot of sense. I feel like, so I'm a big Mega Man player, and that's how it works in Mega Man. But the thing that you have in Mega Man is that the levels are short and they're confined. You pick them. It's not like you have to travel and remember a larger map and traverse dangerous terrain to get back to the level that you just died at. And I think that that's why it was so difficult for me in this game, because I don't like traveling around an overworld, and it's hard for me to remember every left and right turn that I take, And so it was just one more like frustrating thing for me to have to deal with. I mean, playing it with Ben was great because he just keeps track of it, or we have a guide up or whatever. And so again, like I highly recommend people play this with a guide and on Switch so they can rewind.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to hear kind of your defense of the live system, Ben, because to me, I never got past a point with that particular mechanic in this game where I was viewing it as an annoyance that I just wish wasn't there, and never really got to a point where I felt like that was something that should have been in this game. I felt like it was an experiment that, like, we had guests who came on who were able to give us the historical context for why that was a thing that was tried. And so I get that at least, but I never got to a point of feeling like, oh, this is something that should have been in this game. And I'm glad that it didn't stick around, But you definitely kind of argue for it somewhat, eloquently. And I think that's like you're making a good point, and I agree with it. The thing that I keep coming back to is that I wonder if, and this is not to invalidate my own like ranking and feelings about this game as presented on our show, I've been wondering if my thoughts and opinions on it can be taken 100% seriously, like 90% seriously, sure, but that extra 10% is definitely a space where I'm not able to speak to the game in its purest possible incarnation, which is for the most part the way that y'all played it. And that's not me saying that I think we played it the wrong way, because as we talked about through multiple times, but in both The Legend of Zelda and Adventure of Link, we feel like it's completely fair to the gameplay experience to be using save states and to be pulling up maps and guides on the internet and whatever. Like, that's because at the end of the day, it's all about just enjoying yourself and having fun.
Yeah. Lyndon, you should never take yourself 100% seriously because nobody else does. So,
oh, that's good. I can't deal with that pressure. Like, I would hate,
on that same, just to kind of reiterate, I think there are some people who, like, let's say you're playing a game and you have a health bar that goes up to 100, right? There are some people that are comfortable playing everyone's comfortable playing at 100% health. Then you have a precipitous drop that is probably like, a very steep drop off as you go, like, are you comfortable at 90? Are you comfortable at 80? Are you comfortable at 70? Like, where do you start getting uncomfortable with the amount of health you have at any given moment while you're playing a game? And I almost feel like that it's a reminder that, health, just like the ammo that you might have, or, the arrows you have in your quiver, or the mana that you have, like, it is a resource that can be utilized to traverse and play the game. And so sometimes, like, the best move is to just like cast the jump spell, jump over the guy throwing axes, take 2 to the back, and like get out of the room. And that's a great use of the resources that you have. But I think a lot of people are really uncomfortable with their life not kind of like being full and being kind of, topped up constantly. And I think that is a lot of what we get out of more recent games, where you have things where, like, oh yes, your shield automatically replenishes when you're playing things, or your life, if you like stand still, refills. And so there are definitely some things in modern gaming that have quality of life, have made a lot of those things a lot easier, and just they make it a lot more accessible for a lot more people to play, which is like a great thing. And this game wouldn't be made now because no one would play it, because it has all those things that it's missing, right? And that's okay, and that's okay that people wouldn't play play this game and that it's missing things. But that doesn't detract necessarily from how it was created and, what was put into it. But I also tend to encourage people if they are playing it for the first time.
Mhm.
So I actually I'd play it on the Switch. I wouldn't use rewind or save states, but I would play the special. And
Oh yeah,
I would
definitely.
start,
The special is such a good option because you have like full HP, right?
Yeah, so you start at 8 on everything. You start all the way leveled up, which means you don't have to worry about, the combat encounters and whatnot getting started. It gets you over that initial death mountain hump. And then by the time you're in Castle 3, by the time you're in Palace 3 or 4, if you're already at 8, it's okay. You're still going to get beat up enough, but it gives you that momentum at the start of the game to actually get going.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion, Ben.
SP
I'm going to have to
one.
go with you on that.
And I have been curious. I mean, obviously, Matt and I are not going to be jumping into those versions anytime soon because we got more games that we got to go on and play. But I do think that next time, if I get the itch to come back around to this style and era of Zelda game, then I think that I'm going to give those a shot. Just to see what they're like, and also for the reasons you're talking about, where I can just kind of hop into it and have a good time right off the bat. And yeah, I think I'm glad that those exist, and I'm glad that they're as easy to play on the Switch as the original versions. But
Lyndon, it's been great to hear you start with episode 1 and how you're I will never play this game ever again in my entire life. And by the end of this season, you have definitely been I'm definitely going to play this again. I know I'm going to. And it's because it's a good game. At the end of the day, it's oh yes, it is a good game and a challenging game. And I think
I've played a lot of bad games in my time. This isn't a bad game. I agree with you guys. I have. I'm sitting here thinking of I just actually when you said that, I was like, ooh, maybe I can play that.
Yeah.
While I'm just sitting around doing nothing and trying to fall asleep or something. And I was like, did I seriously just consider playing this game before bed? I play Dr. Mario before bed. I play simple, fun games. But I'm like, ooh, if I'm all leveled up, I'd go stab some people in the face. And honestly, talk about dopamine rush. When you get into a pattern of the jump, stab, not even the downward thrust, but you're just forward jumping and stabbing. Ooh.
Oh, it feels so good.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, when those iron knuckles just start collapsing at your feet and you never take any damage. Oh my god, it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
One-shotting iron knuckles is definitely a good time. There's no doubt about that.
It's so funny though. It's so funny because we're talking so much about what, whether or not Zelda 2 is a good game or a bad game. And that really, it has me thinking about what even is a bad game? What do we quantify as being a bad game? I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head.
There's a lot
Halo 5 Guardians is a bad game.
Licensed games that are just for a cartoon that they didn't actually make a game. They just made something to sell. That's a bad game. Things that are just for consumers to take off the shelves and take home, and then they don't care what happens from there. Those are bad games for me. I find it's like music. I don't believe that there's bad music, but I do believe that there's music that is purely derived from the capitalists' urge to feed consumers and get money in response and not care about the product. I think that's a bad game.
I think that's a pretty good qualification. Yeah.
I'd be hard pressed to call a game bad that real people put real time, real energy, real effort into creating. It's kind of it's like how I feel about movies. At the end of the day, hundreds, if not thousands of people tried really hard usually to put together a movie. So even when it might not be the most amazing thing you've ever seen, it's still just the artistic and creative effort that goes into a lot of things.
Yeah.
That's where I am much more reluctant to criticize, especially now having been someone who is now trying to, create.
Yeah, dude,
and it's wow,
easy.
I'm really glad that I have been very liberal with my praise for years because, when you're on the other side of it, you're just oh my God, are we really going to play Ocean Palace for the third time? Is that really what we're going to do?
3 times.
3 times, guys.
That's how many times you got bounced back to North Castle and then had to head all the way back over there.
Okay, do you want to know? Do you want? Should we just tell the people?
Yeah, we should tell it. Why not?
Tell the people.
Yeah, on a different podcast.
podcast.
On a totally different. We'll probably put this in our podcast in an in-between season, but
I love it.
So we started the podcast. We played through the first 2 games, and then I opened up the recorded files.
So we were with each other and just played straight. We just played all of the game.
Whoa.
And-
in one sitting?
No, we were together for a few days.
Okay.
But like we just like played them all to like have all of the audio like done. And then we were going to come back and do the intro bit and then go into like the gameplay.
Right,
Wow.
which is, we do that occasionally for a few episodes, but we just like got it all done, and it was grueling. And we didn't end up getting to do anything else. And I opened up the files, and it turned out that we hadn't been recording the game audio, which was something I required. So, all right, so check this out. The first season, the first half of the first season, there are a couple episodes where I ripped the game audio for the first Zelda from
The
YouTube
OST. Yeah.
and just plopped it on top of what we were doing.
You just
So
mashed
you'll
it.
like hear, I don't know, the ocean, whoosh, 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 when we're in the desert. And that's because that game audio does not match. I would like paste in, okay, now we're in a dungeon. Okay, now we're in a boss fight. It was grueling. Like I spent 7 to 12 hours editing each of those episodes that I had to doctor in the audio. So I was like, yo, we have to re-record the second game because this is like 10 episodes of this. And that's just, I don't have that much time. Even though I'm not doing anything, I don't have that much time.
And so we're not together anymore. So we are back apart. I'm back in DC. He's in Ohio. We're not really going to see each other again. So this is when we have to come up with a emulated way to do all of this. This is where technical structures start getting to put in place on how we can actually manage all of this with the technical setup that we have, knowing that we can't go out and really buy anything.
Dude, that is
So then-
wild.
I can't
Yeah,
conceive
so then-
like how
it gets worse. So then playthrough 2 starts.
How could it
And
be worse?
playthrough 2 is going just fine.
Going great.
We get through the first and second palaces, which was like the first and second episodes, and then the Mac that I had, I upgraded the operating system.
Oh, right.
And so the way that a Mac works is that a Mac doesn't have an internal microphone for recording like what's happening on the screen.
Right.
Unlike a Windows machine, which does just natively, which means you have to use like a driver and it's not a big deal. But the problem is that so I
a big
upgraded.
deal.
I did a day 0 upgrade, and the app that I use no longer worked. But I didn't know that. And we recorded an entire episode, and I clicked everything like what's supposed to happen, and it's like, oh yeah, we're good. I can see the yada yada yada. Every 2 minutes in the gameplay audio, you would just hear, "You have not paid for this license. You have not paid for this license."
Oh no!
Just every 2 minutes, like clockwork. Yep.
And I'm just like devastated. I was like, all right, I'm just going to sit down, edit this episode, grab the big old glass of whiskey, and I'm ready to go. Oh my gosh.
Yikes, dude. I mean, seriously, how much time would you say that you actually spent just dropping external audio and trying to line it up with what was happening?
Oh, for those episodes in the first game that I was doing. I mean, dude, I don't even. What is time?
It's just a social construct,
May
man.
of 2020. So this is like April. Oh, this is like March, April of 2020. So this is like perfect. Like,
and I was like at that time the only real like day-to-day thing that I had. I think like a week and a half out of every month I would help my grandfather with an estate sale, and I was like cleaning and making music. But like I didn't have much going on. So like, you'd think that I had all the time in the world. And I think that's why I wasn't just like, nope, we're re-recording this. I'm just stubborn. I saw the
he
challenge.
didn't tell me. Like Patrick didn't tell me about the error until we got into Zelda 2. And he's like, hey, this isn't going to work out. Here's why. And I'm just like, we could have replayed it any moment.
Dude, you could have replayed all of Zelda 1 in the amount of time it took you to do one episode.
Yeah, I know. The problem was the technical language. So game audio versus gameplay audio, like this didn't work, that didn't work. Like, what's this? What's that? And we didn't have like we didn't have like those words set up, and the language wasn't there yet. Mm-hmm. So when I would tell Ben what was wrong, he'd be like, "Oh, can't you just do a thing?" And Ben also hadn't really worked with audio and troubleshooted and done workarounds and stuff.
Yeah, so that's like me trying to tell Lyndon how to do audio editing, and I've never laid eyes on audio editing software in my whole life. Yeah, that wouldn't work.
How can you even?
I have no concept.
So we got everything. I mean, thankfully, Ben has the patience to sit down and troubleshoot, and whereas I will stubbornly just trudge through a problem in a terrible manner, Ben will sit down and fix the thing and make my life and his life easier in the future. I don't look out for future Patrick very much.
Future Patrick does not like past.
You should be nicer to future Patrick.
I really should.
Yeah. Well, that's why we now have like this whole setup where we have this whole OBS studio that pulls everything together, puts it all out in one thing. I mean, today, this is the first time it all worked perfectly. But today, we have one single recording that is the video of all of us, the game, Patrick and I. It has it has the gameplay audio, Patrick's audio, and my audio in track 1. Mm-hmm. And then track 2 is gameplay. Track 3 is me. And track 4 is Patrick. It's one file. I can use it for my video. Pat can use it for the podcast. And we're just done.
And I can hear the game music, which I haven't been able to hear the game music for a lot of our series recording. Right. Yeah. So anytime you hear me humming along to the music, I can hear it. If I'm not doing that, I probably can't hear the game music. And if I do, it's faintly coming in through Ben's microphone. And I got to say, much like The Adventure of Link, learning the hard way how to make a podcast, especially this particular kind of podcast where you need the game audio as well as the both voices, and you're recording remotely. It was grueling, but we figured it out, and now we're really good at it.
We're really good at
it. after hopefully, you get through the first few palaces, you get a grasp on the game. I think that the learning curve on this game is really rough. I agree with you, Matt. It's not great. It's not sensible. I know, Lyndon, you feel a little differently, but at the end of the day, by the time you get to that 4th palace, you know how to play the game. And, to extend the metaphor, bring it back one more time. I feel like Ben and I know how to play the game because we had such a difficult time getting into the season. But the third attempt to play this game and record it went very well. It went very
so good.
Third time was the charm.
You're good at the game. We're good at the podcast.
Matt, can I tell you, I was so nervous knowing that you were going into this game and just feeling your frustration from The Legend of Zelda, which isn't a frustrating game.
No, it really wasn't.
I'm just and I thought for sure that you were going to miss a magical container, specifically the one in Maze Island. I was like, he is going to miss it. He is going to get to the Thunder Spell. He is going to be like, why can't I get this? What did I miss? And then I was just I don't know what you're going to do. I was so nervous that you were going to miss a magical container and just have a conniption.
Yeah.
But then I also wanted it for the content. I really wanted it for the content. I was please let it happen. Please let it happen.
Not that you're over here cheering for it.
Yeah, you would have had a 2-hour episode of me just raging at the game and the game design. And you're absolutely right. I cannot believe that I didn't miss a magic container because I would have flipped a lid. It would have not
when you
been
said
good.
you did the maze perfectly, and I was and I was listening to you and I was on a run and I was like, oh, did he say he got the magic container in the maze or not? And I was like, I don't know, but we'll find out at the end of this game. So.
It's so weird to me when I think back on it, because there are several places in the game that we could have hit kind of hard walls like that, where we did some things out of order and wasted a ton of time, or we didn't find the correct amount of things and we couldn't progress or whatever. And And that never really happened to either of us. I think we got very lucky in that way to where like,
nice.
Even though, yes, like the game was very hard and very frustrating at times, that was all really down to the intended like mechanics and combat loop and all that kind of stuff. And it was never anything quite that catastrophic, but that definitely would have like put a huge damper in my day if that had happened. No. So yeah, definitely very grateful that we never ran into that particular problem. But kind of going back to what you were saying just a second ago about like, doing something enough and then, the feeling of now I'm good at this. Matt, would you say that at the end of the game, you felt like you were good at it?
No, not really. I feel like I was better at it than I was at the beginning, but I still don't feel like I was good at it. I was not to a point where I could reliably jump stab Iron Knuckles in the face. I was not at a point where I wouldn't just like miss a jump and fall into a lava pit and die. I was not at a point where I didn't have to accidentally cheese Dark Link. I don't feel like, I got better.
Nobody can kill Dark Link without cheesing him.
Lyndon did.
What?
I did.
Yeah, he did.
I did.
Bro. Yep. Oh my gosh. All right. If I had a hat on, I'd take it off, but I should probably keep my headphones on. That's incredible.
Yeah, that was nuts.
Yeah, I don't know if I just lucked into it or not, but yeah, I hung out in the middle of the arena and just let him come to me and just did the trading of blows. And I think I had to pop heal twice.
Okay.
But yeah, got it done. So
I mean, in our playthrough, the final one, Patrick is playing in the Great Palace. I think he probably restarted the Great Palace like 2 or 3 times in total. Because if you die fully and you get a game over, you actually start at the start of the Great Palace, which is actually a really nice mechanic.
Right. Yeah.
But I can remember like I'm watching him play. I mean, so what we would do is the person not playing would have a guide pulled up just to offer like subtle nudges, but never to be like turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right. It was much more just like I'm truly stuck, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not just gonna have you wander around because that's like really lame. But he's coming to Thunderbird. He does not have enough magic to cast Thunder, and he only has 1 life. And I just know he's gonna get in there. And he's going to die. And he's going to start the whole Great Palace over. And I'm just sitting there just watching, just like, all right, well, here he goes. And he gets in there and he dies. And
was it everything you hoped it would be and more?
I mean, it was pretty great. I mean, it was the only social media clip I ever made was of Patrick beating Thunderbird. But then walking into the Dark Link room, no lives left, no magic left, no health left, and just dying, just instantaneously dying.
And then screaming.
Yeah, but fortunately, Thunderbird stays dead, which he did not know. So he got to Thunderbird, I think, with like a whole life left to use.
Ready.
Like, okay, I'll die, I'll do this, and then I'll die against Dark Link, and then I'll have full health. And he just was able to. He's like, oh, I can just go right to Dark Link, and then he died against Dark Link once, and then beat him. But yeah, it was just like it was just so funny just to like know that was happening.
I died against Dark Link once, and then looked up how to cheese it. That's what happened.
I was gonna say when you got back to the boss chamber and Thunderbird was not there, did you just like was that just 50 pounds off your shoulders right there?
It was like, do you remember back in the day when? Oh no, you're from Texas. You ever had a snow day?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, it was like a snow day, but if I were working a job as an adult that I absolutely hate and it didn't count as PTO, like like that was the feeling.
And actually since leaving school and being employed and whatnot, that has happened once or twice because we don't get a ton of snow in Texas, but when we do get snow, it shuts everything down and like the world stops for a few days, right? And so, yeah, those are always like, I don't want anyone to get hurt, want everyone to be safe. But also, I love that this is a sufficient catastrophe to like get me out of work without burning my days off, that's always a good feeling. Yeah, I get you. Yep.
It was relieving. What a game. Oh my gosh.
I just can't, like looking back on it and being done with it now, the thing that I keep coming back to is that I think I more so than Matt, especially having had a few weeks to really think about it now. I feel like there is a core to this game that is real solid. Like I feel like there's a true thread that runs through everything that this game is, and in like within that is a very good set of ideas and something that could actually be iterated upon in a modern way.
Definitely, they could do a remake of this. They just have to make the fighting a little better, and that's it. Like they bump the graphics, make the hand-to-hand combat fun, and you got yourself a really dope game. I think that the story's good. Yeah, the music. I mean, I think they need to do a little more variations on the music, but I think it's there.
Yeah, and I don't know. I need to spend a little bit more time trying to like to parse exactly what I think the takeaways should be and what things I would sort of leave behind. But I think the story of this whole experience for me has just been that I feel very complicated. I have a very complicated set of feelings about kind of where I ended up with this game, and I think that's why it was so fun to talk about, and that's why it was so fun to dig into, and
Definitely.
It sounds like that pretty much is exactly where y'all are at as well.
Definitely. Yeah, Ben came away really liking this game. And I came away with one of our best running gags in our podcast, being the curmudgeon about the game. And, like you said, it's good to have something that you can think critically about. And it opens up discussion more so than just yes, that game was incredible, I think.
So I have a question. If y'all could have a remake of either The Legend of Zelda or Zelda 2, and it's in the style of, like, not necessarily the visual style, but it's in the same kind of intention, I guess, as the Link's Awakening remake, where it's the same core game, massively improved visuals, and refinements to some of the things that haven't aged as well. So in Link's Awakening, that was the 2-button item slot assignment system, right? And like one or two other things. But in, I got to believe that like in Zelda 1, it would be a similar kind of tweaking to your inventory management.
Right.
And, and I'm sure the combat would feel better, right? Because that would get an overhaul as well. And in Zelda 2, I think it would, again, I think there would be some tuning to the combat, and then, graphical upgrades and some changes to the way that, health and lives and stuff work and how game overs function. So if you could have either of those, like tasteful yet substantial remakes of either The Legend of Zelda or The Adventure of Link, we're gonna go to Ben first, then Pat, then Matt, and then me. Which one of those would you prefer to have?
So I think that The Legend of Zelda is essentially a perfect game. So I'll give it to Link's Adventure.
I'm going to give it to The Adventure of Link too, because I feel like A Link to the Past is basically just a improved version of what they were working with The Legend of Zelda.
I would also go with Adventure of Link because I came away honestly being willing to replay Legend of Zelda. The more that I think back on my time with it, the more I kind of think about how you've, Lyndon, have described your time with like Hyper Light Drifter or something, where it's just like I think if I were to play it at my own pace instead of like trying to put out content for it and just kind of like mosey my way through it, I probably would have been a little less frustrated. So, I would definitely give it to Adventure of Link because I think it has a lot more room to improve with, I think, some fairly easy quality of life changes that could make it just a vastly better game.
Yeah, and that's really where I'm at with it as well. I think that I think that there's more room with Adventure of Link to kind of raise the score, I guess, on it. If I'm rating these things on a scale of 1 to 10, right? I think that there's a world in which a remake of The Legend of Zelda would bring it from like an 8 to a 9. for me, maybe like get a 1 point jump, but sorry. But I think that with Zelda 2, it would be much more dramatic than that. I think that a good, tasteful remake of Zelda 2 could really bring it from probably as a 6 or something is what I would give it at the moment, and would have the potential to bring it up to like an 8-ish.
Yeah, and I almost think that I could think of you could probably do 2 very minor tweaks to get most people to enjoy the game thoroughly. That would probably revolve around working on the difficulty spike around Death Mountain and making combat hitboxes a bit clearer when you're engaging with an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet those 2 bits of polish, which is why I like the idea of not like, we're not going to like redo the entire thing. We're just going to make these very, very, very tiny tweaks to the structure of the game.
I think that it'd be good if they added Guardian Acorns with multiple dialogue boxes that you have to read every time you pick one up. I think that would be a really good improvement to it.
And don't forget the soundtrack that sticks around for like a minute and a half.
That recently exited a dungeon because he didn't want to hear it anymore.
Hey, Matt, I know I obviously heard you, in multiple episodes, like profess your love for Metroid Dread.
Mm-hmm.
Have you played other 2D Metroid games?
Actually, no, I have not. Metroid Dread is the only Metroid game I've ever played to completion.
You know which one you need to play that?
It would be really interesting to hear you, hear your thoughts on playing through Super Metroid without, just get into it, no maps, no guides online, and just kind of see. I mean, because the original Metroid is very difficult.
Yeah.
But, Super Metroid is essentially a perfect game. And I'd wonder what your feedback would be, kind of seeing a game 30 years younger and kind of seeing how it compares to how much you enjoyed in Metroid Dread.
Speaking for myself, and you're right, I would love for Matt to have that experience. I've played and beaten Super Metroid twice.
Okay.
And I think for me, I agree with you. I think that for people who really enjoy that style of game, I think that Super Metroid is as much of an achievement as A Link to the Past is for the Zelda series. It's just, I mean, man, when you think about the first party lineup on the SNES, and you get you've got Super Mario World, Super Metroid, and A Link to the Past, and that's your 3 big, holy shit, dear God in heaven.
Yeah. I think I would love to run the Link to the Past Super Metroid randomizer. Are you all familiar with that?
No.
Okay, so a randomizer is where where every item is essentially shuffled in the entire game. But there are rules in place that make sure that there's still a logical way for you to get those items. That way you can progress in some manner through the game. So a Link to the Past Super Metroid randomizer, there are 4 locations on each map, and it sends you back and forth between the 2 games. And there are Link to the Past items in the Link to the Past game and in the Super Metroid game. And there are Super Metroid items in the Super Metroid game and in the Link to the Past game. And so you're perpetually moving back and forth between 2 different games, 2 different gaming styles, picking up items to try and get to a point where you can beat both. I think you just have to beat one of the games to win, technically.
Dang, that sounds incredibly complicated.
Yeah, you really got to know the games, because you got to know all right, there's this missile container in this spot because that might have the gravity boots that you need, or it might have the it might have the hook shot, is in this one spot.
Well, yeah, especially Super Metroid, which is basically the end game of that game is just finding all the hidden missile upgrades and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Super Metroid is a weird one for me because I really love that game and I do appreciate it for what it is, but I have a very, very difficult time, especially now having played Metroid Dread, which I also freaking love. I have a difficult time with Super Metroid now, given that the canon does not have a 360-degree range of motion. That's my biggest thing that makes it hard for me to go play those games, It's you're either pointing straight up, diagonal upright, straight left right, or diagonal down left right. And so
I see.
yeah, but
hop. you can't just aim at what you want. You got to do a little jump and
Yeah, you gotta hop around a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a much different. Yeah, it's a much different. You got to time out your jump and stuff.
But still a fantastic game. Still a great game.
Certainly.
And yeah, I do think it, but honestly, it makes me wonder, like, we've talked so much about the possibility of ever getting a remake for Zelda 2, and I think it's a pipe dream, honestly.
I would deserve that.
It's not going to happen. And I wonder if the reason for that is, in addition to the fact, I mean, I'm sure there's many reasons for that, but I wonder if one of the biggest reasons for that is that Nintendo would not want to cross wires with what they're doing with the Metroid series, you know?
Oh yeah, it's not I mean, they're already doing this incredible platforming exploration stuff with Metroid. Why would you remake the least favorite? Is this the least favorite Zelda game?
Yes.
Right?
I think most people would say yes.
I mean, the Capcom ones aren't as popular, but they're still beloved.
Yeah. Yep.
This is the black sheep. This is the black sheep.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway,
I think
Matt,
that there's
yeah.
I think there's room for some other of the newer games to kind of fall below this. Like, there's some people on our Discord specifically that have said like Phantom Hourglass or Spirit Tracks can sometimes fall below like less good. But as far as like historically disliked Zelda games,
well,
I think
like
this probably
new
takes
historically, right?
Yeah,
because like at the time people loved it.
Yeah, it was commercially hugely successful, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a sequel, it did phenomenally. Like I was just looking at it, and it did like 75% of what the original Legend of Zelda did, which anybody making a sequel then at that point would definitely take those numbers. Like that's on the same game engine. That's phenomenal.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. You know that a Super Nintendo was like $200 when it came out? That's like $400 now.
I was about to say, that's crazy expensive for the 80s.
It's crazy expensive. Like
that is insanely expensive.
$350.
What did a game cost?
It was
60 to 80 then.
Yeah, games have always cost $60 to $80. Always.
Yeah, Nintendo games have pretty much always been 60 to 80, which I mean, when you start thinking about it that way, you're like, okay, this game took a while to play through and you had to make your own maps. And it's like, yeah, that's because they cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Wow. That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there weren't like, $10 Nindies that you could buy to like, just like beef up your like game repertoire.
Right.
Like I just bought Hyper Light Drifter for $19 and it was just like, oh, that's incredible that I can buy that. Right.
And if you got stuck, you had to have a Nintendo Power subscription to call the Nintendo Power hotline.
Yep.
Dude, have you ever played Hyper Light Drifter before?
I'm playing it right now. Yeah, I'm like 2 hours into it.
Oh my god!
I asked. I'm in a Switch group with a bunch of Patrick's friends, and I was looking for something to kind of like scratch an itch. And they gave me a bunch of recommendations, and they're like Hyper Light Drifter, like you should check that out. And they know that I like severely difficult games that really reward you for learning very minute enemy details and tells and those kind of things. And so far it's like exactly that. I'm like, yes, this is like exactly what I want. I want action combat where if I can, by the time that I have mastered a room, I won't take a single hit. Like that's what I go for in a lot of my gaming.
One thing that Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 really did for me coming out of them is it put me in a ferocious mood to go play some Zelda likes that are in the indie scene, because a lot of those games do kind of cling to some of the older conventions of Zelda, much more so than like the Ocarina Wind Waker sort of style, right? And there's a lot of games that I really love that really like they learned a lot from Zelda 1 and from Zelda 2. Like Shovel Knight, getting done with Zelda 2, I was like, man, I really should go give Shovel Knight another try. And after Zelda 1, I was very much thinking like, man, I enjoyed that a lot. I need to go play Tunic now, because that really seems like a good thing to kind of bridge into. And of course, I'm playing Wind Waker at the moment. But
have you started Tunic yet?
I haven't. I do. I do have it, and I'm gonna play it at some point. I'm gonna make the time for it.
I wonder if we should do a little crossover Tunic special.
Oh, that would be fun.
I would definitely love to do that.
We could like break it up into like 4 chapters and do it like a book club type thing with like both podcast audiences and like invite them in, and do something like that. That could be really cool.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I would. What game this is, and I haven't started a new game in a while.
I'd definitely be down for that. I think Matt and I have always considered Zelda Likes to be a place that we would eventually want to go in terms of our content, And I think that just sounds like a great time. So that's another thing we'll be taking offline. We'll talk more about that. We'll see what we come up with.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
that's good.
do y'all? I know that we probably need to get this wrapped up. We're getting a little far into the evening here, and it's been a great conversation so far. But I just wanted to give y'all a few more minutes, real quick, if you had anything else you wanted to say, kind of in closing, about your thoughts about Zelda 2 and the 8-bit games in general.
Yeah, I can start. I think When You Were Born is going to make a huge difference on your enjoyment. Even between the two of us, like there are, I think, 4 years between the older and the younger brothers. And just like, was your first system, a Sega Master System and a NES, or was it a Super Nintendo and a Sega Genesis? And that's really going to make a big difference on like the nostalgia feel when you get into something. And so I think putting yourself in the right, frame of mind, which can be really difficult because people, are like working shitty jobs and, not getting paid a lot. And it's like, you really want to come home and like struggle through something. The one nice thing that is great about these older games is they don't have any load time and they never have to do a software update. So you can always play them as soon as you want to play them. So that's my pitch for playing older games.
No getting around that.
Instant gratification.
The day one patch does not exist.
It does not. For better or for worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if we're giving advice here, I would just say play some other Zelda games first and approach this as the black sheep of the series, knowing the struggles that you're going to have. Play the SP version on the Switch if you got an online subscription, have some fun with it, and know that it's going to be tough. Treat it like a Mega Man game. It's not.
I got one slot in my family plan. If somebody needs it, just let me know.
Did we just give that to my buddy, or do you have 2 slots?
No, I got like 3 slots, so it's all good.
Oh, okay. Ben's giving out a slot. Watch out. Yeah, it's a cool game. I'm softening up on it in retrospect, and maybe it's just that time heals all things, including memories that should last, because I might pick this game up and hate it. Who knows? Only time will tell. But it is growing on me, and I will go back and listen to a bunch of your season. I like that it's grown on you guys, and that you came away from it seeing its merits, because it does have a lot of them. I like the positivity and the ability to look at a game critically. We don't get to criticize many Zelda games. So if not anything else, it's good because it's a Zelda game we get to criticize.
Well, you're rolling into the next most easiest game to criticize, I think, in Wind Waker. So enjoy traveling the seas, gentlemen. Enjoy traveling the seas.
Man,
wow.
As someone who's played Wind Waker 3 or 4 times, I don't know that I can co-sign that message off the top of my head.
You playing without the fast sale, or are you playing with the fast sale?
I'm playing with the fast sale.
Oh, there we go. Okay, well, some of us didn't have the fast sale when we first played it. We're grumpy about it still.
Yeah, I have a friend who played through Wind Waker without any warps during quarantine and enjoyed the open seas because he had nothing but time.
See, that would make a big difference. Yeah, I almost played it on the GameCube because I happen to have a GameCube and that like Zelda Anniversary Collector's Edition that has Wind Waker on it. And Lyndon was like, "No, you cannot play this on GameCube for your first time. We're getting you a Wii U, and you have to play it on Wii U." And I was like, "Why?" He was like, "Because you're going to hate the slow sailing, and the gathering the Triforce quest on GameCube is awful. So yeah, we're not doing that." I was like, "Well, fair enough. Fair enough."
I have played it on both systems. I liked it on both systems. I also had plenty of time sitting around in my basement when I was sick, like one winter or something. So again,
I've never beaten it. So
we will in a few seasons.
We will in a few seasons.
You're gonna love it. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Of course, Matt and I are super excited to get into our discussion about that game. I have already played my chunk for this week, and Matt finally managed to track down a copy of the game for less than $100, which turns out that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, so. Apparently those are few and far between unless you go to I had to get it.
Thank you, patrons.
Yep. I had to get it used from GameStop, which they have it for about $37, which was still about twice as much as I thought I was going to have to pay for it. So,
all right, that's not too bad.
But the Amazon listings were like, there were two, and they were both like $100 to $150. Like, holy crap. This is the future Nintendo wants. This is what it looks like when there's no Wind Waker on the Switch. It's a bleak world. But anyway, we're all set up now. We're ready to go. We're going to have it played, and it's going to be a good time. And of course, can't wait to share our thoughts with it about you gentlemen in a bit more detail further down the road when we circle back up and have a conversation about it. But until then, Ben and Pat, it has been just an incredible time having y'all on. It's always such a great conversation. We always appreciate. Yeah, I mean,
thanks so much, y'all.
Your perspective is just is wonderful, and this is always a good time. Real quick before we get out of here, why don't y'all go ahead and drop them links, drop them social handles. For as long as we still have Twitter, maybe let people know where on there they can find you.
Yeah. So we're currently doing season 4 of the Hyrule Podcasters. We are playing Link's Awakening DX for the Game Boy Color. We invite anyone to come play along with us as we go dungeon by dungeon. And Pat, where can people find us on the interwebs?
So you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Hyrule Podcasters and on Twitter at Hyrule Podcaster. If you want to support us directly, head over to our Patreon page. And you can pop into our Discord as well under the same name, Hyrule Podcasters, if you just want to chat with your boys. We're there. We're ready for you.
There you go.
Definitely go give those guys a follow. They're making some great stuff, and we've received a sneak peek at some of the stuff they have coming up, and it is even yet more great than the stuff that they've made in the past. So
absolutely,
nothing but good things coming up. All right, Matt, I think that'll about do it. What do you think?
I think I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
Are you ready to call season 6 of Sacred Realms Pod a done thing?
Season 6. Here we are at the end. We made it all the way.
I just out of curiosity, after we mentioned how many episodes that we've recorded earlier in the show, I went back and looked, and this will be our 85th episode.
Woo! 85.
Congratulations.
Yep. A lot of content.
Thank you. We're getting close to that hundo mark.
We're getting close to that hundo, and actually, I'm curious now if we're going to hit that in...
I think we'll hit it in Wind Waker.
In Wind Waker, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Or imagine if episode 1 of Tears of the Kingdom was...
Tears.
So we know that it won't be because we have vowed to not do the season for Tears of the Kingdom until we've had a chance to play it through without having to do content about it. Like we want to experience it sans content
that's smart.
Pressure. So
I guess we'll beat you to it then.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what to do.
We will not hit episode 100 in Wind Waker. It's only going to be 9 episodes. So,
you think? Oh,
yep,
okay.
we've got it all planned out. So, yeah, episode 100 is going to be in whatever top-down game we play after Wind Waker.
Which will be either Minish Cap or the Oracle games combined or
Link Between Worlds.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like Link Between Worlds.
Or the Tunic Game Club.
Or the Tunic Game Club. Could be the Tunic Game Club.
Could be the Tunic Game Club. You never know.
You never know.
All right. Well, with all that being said, yes, we will be back in season 7 of this show, which starts next week and covers another epic chapter in the Legend of Zelda series. But until that time, let's go ahead and do our outro. Get out of here for the week. If you enjoyed today's show and you'd like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it is not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday for the first episode of season 7 with our thoughts on the game intro of Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. The Wind Waker can be played in its original form on the GameCube. It can be played on the Nintendo Wii U in its HD form, and either of those versions can be played via emulator on a Steam Deck or any equivalent device, which is totally an okay way to play that if that's what you want to do, because it's not on the Switch. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full. May your arrows never miss. We will catch you next week in Season 7. Sacred Realms is an independent podcast production, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Our music comes from Zelda and Chill by Mikkel and is graciously provided to us by Mikkel and Game Chops Records. Zelda and Chill is available to stream on Spotify or to purchase directly from GameChops.com. Finally, our thanks go to Nintendo for creating such exceptional and innovative experiences.